This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Leila Hernandez with American University School of Communication, and welcome to another episode of SOC Masterclass. Before we get into the presentation, I would like to go over some introductory information to get everyone acclimated with the platform that we're using. This webinar is automatically muted, so your interface with me will be the chat box. My first question is, can everyone hear me? If you can hear me, type yes in the chat box. And I'm going to type it in case people can't hear me. Can you hear me? Yes or no? I love when the yeses start rolling in. I feel like technology often fails me, but not today. Not today. All right. Glad to see that. So feel free to type your questions there throughout the presentation, and we'll answer them at the Q&A session at the end. Again, my name is Leila. Not only do I work at the School of Communication, or SOC for short, but I'm also an alum. I received my master's degree from SOC in 2010, so I'm happy to speak to you both as a staff member and as a proud alum. And today I'm honored to be joined by SOC journalism professor, Jennifer LaFleur. She joined AU in 2017 as data journalist in residence and data editor for the investigative reporting workshop. Previously, she was a senior editor. I apologize, I haven't had enough coffee today. Editor at Reveal from the Center for Investigative Reporting and was director of computer assisted reporting at ProPublica. She currently teaches data-driven journalism. So during today's webinar, Jennifer will give a presentation on data journalism, and I will ask her a few follow-up questions about what she's doing now at SOC, and she and I will both be happy to answer your questions as well. So if you have any questions for either of us, please just type them into the chat box. And without further ado, I am going to get started with Jennifer's presentation. And thank you so much for being here. And if you like, you can have the keyboard and you can do that to forward your slides. And there's our microphone. And thank you so much for being here.
Okay, she's letting me drive. It can get dangerous. Well, glad you all are listening in. I have loved being here at SOC. I went to another school of journalism myself,
No hard feelings.
I think we have a great program here. And I think partially is we have a lot of in-residence folks who work in the profession and are teaching at the same time, but are really committed to the school. So it's different from places where you might have an adjunct professor come in, because we are all part of the whole team here. So as Leila mentioned, I teach data-driven journalism, and I'm an editor at the investigative reporting workshop, which is a nonprofit investigative newsroom based at SOC. So some students get the opportunity to work with us and work on big long-term investigations for our partners all around the country. She gave you my background, so I will just go on then with slides. I love data because data let me do stories no one else could do. It helped me test assumptions, and it helped me hold the powerful accountable. So I'm not just getting anecdotal evidence, I can look at entire sets of data. One of my favorite data-based investigations is a series the Associated Press did a couple of years ago, looking at slaves who were gathering fish for seafood companies around the world. They used several different databases to get this data, and in the end, they ended up freeing about 2,000 people who were enslaved in cages on islands in Asia because of the story. So it's one of my favorite examples. It's a hard-hitting investigation, but not every data story has to be a hard-hitting investigation. There's fun stories you can do too. This is a Dallas Morning News story where the reporter wanted to see what day of the year people most often get married, and it is indeed Valentine's Day. That was just a fun, quick hit based on the marriage data in Texas. So your story might begin as data. It also might begin as documents. But getting it into a database is sort of like giving you a superpower. You can do a lot more with that information in the end. And government information is on computer. This is not a current government computer, but you get the point. And the story itself may vary. It may be an interactive graphic. It may be a map. It may be even a virtual reality analysis. Some of the tools we use to analyze the data or produce database stories, spreadsheets, databases, statistics, mapping, front and back end programming to do interactive graphics or searchable databases, and design skills. Some people tend to be a little bit more in the development of interactives, while other people are more on the analysis side, but there's opportunities for mixing and matching both of them. The good thing about data is it's the one place where there are lots of jobs. As someone who used to hire people with these skills, it's hard to find folks who have strong data skills. And so this is the message board at the Investigative Reporting Conference. All of these are data jobs, data reporter jobs all over. Even in beat reporter jobs or investigative jobs are calling for data skills. So it's an important skill to have. You don't have to look like this. But data is really the foundation of a lot of stories. Occasionally I'll have people say, well, I don't want to do a data story because I don't like writing about numbers. Some of the best data stories, the data is the foundation, but then the reporting tells the story on top of that foundation. And people are always important to a database story. No one wants to read number. Speaking of numbers, here's some numbers for a project I worked on looking at truck accidents in Texas. But we had to tell that story through people. One of those people was Pistol, a trucker who I spent 2 weeks on the road with. She had 2 poodles. One was named Candy. I don't remember what the other one's name, but I was on the road as a trucker, learning what the life of a trucker was like and learning about all the things that they run into. Here's an ESPN story that used their own database that they built to look at food inspections at professional stadiums around the country. And I do kind of love this lead. I won't read it out loud.
I watched a bit of that footage, and if you're having lunch right now, don't watch it.
We use data to look at problems in public housing units in Richmond, California. This actually led to this whole facility being shut down and people being moved into eventually better facilities. It took a long time. This is a BuzzFeed investigation that led to some corrections in the world of tennis. They showed that there was fixes in tennis matches. We've used satellite data to explore fire and where fires were happening in California. This is one we looked at to look at earthquakes in California, not earthquakes in Oklahoma, because as Californians, we assume that California had the most earthquakes because of injection wells due to fracking. Oklahoma actually has more earthquakes now. The challenge with us at Reveal is because we had a radio show, we not only had to tell stories on our website, but we also had to get data into the show. So I'm not going to go to it right now, but we developed some tools for actually doing audio graphics on the radio show, which is kind of a unique way of using data. These stories usually begin with a tip, a topic, or even a news event, but you have to identify the data, make sure the data is right, and then do your reporting and writing. An example is the Miracle on the Hudson, where due to bird strikes, a plane miraculously landed on the Hudson. This happened when I worked at ProPublica, and we could see this happening outside our window.
Oh my gosh. Can I ask, what was the data part of that story?
Yeah, we're going to go on.
Oh, we are? No. Wow.
Good question. I did not tell her to ask that. But we need to look at, when that story happened, other airports, people in other cities wanted to know, how could we look at whether or not this is a problem in our city? So we had to find out who has the data, what records are there. And there is a federal database of animal strikes on airplanes.
No
so that allows us to do things like find out which airline has the most strikes. It also allows us to look at which type of animal is striking planes the most. And by the way, it isn't just birds. There's opossums and fox and all kinds of things that get sucked up into aircraft and on the runway. So,
Wow.
So data can tell a lot of stories. For me, I think of data stories all the time. This is the inspection inside the elevator in the building where I live. You might notice that it's only valid until 2016. This makes me want to get the whole database of elevator inspections in Maryland and see just how bad this problem is. Sports stories, lots of sports stories use data. This is an analysis of the draft data to look at, what schools got recruited the most, what positions got recruited the most. Finding the data can be a challenge. It's not always online. We tend to think it is. Sometimes we have to, put in a public records request for the data or even build the data ourselves. Kaiser Health News has built this database looking at, and the investigative reporting workshop has actually helped with this project, looking at money going from pharmaceutical companies to patient advocacy groups.
Ooh.
And data isn't just rows and columns. It can be observations. It could be a map. This is a map of a tornado that went through New York a few years ago. But not everything has to be a map. Sometimes editors love to have maps. So we got to keep that in mind. And this is where we used satellite data and a map together. During the drought in California, we wanted to figure out who were the heaviest water users. They would not tell us who they were. They would just tell us where they were. So we actually used satellite data to identify who the biggest users were. And Good Morning America did a little segment on it, which is a little amusing. So I'll play that. We'll play that for you right now.
The hunt is on in LA for the homeowners of the Wet Prince of Bel Air, who reportedly used almost 12 million gallons of water in a single year. This, of course, during California's crippling drought. Nick Watt is in LA. He's on the search. Hey, Nick.
Good morning, Robin. Well, we got a mystery on our hands because using a lot of water is not illegal. Utility companies will tell us how much the big guzzlers use and roughly where they live, but they will not name and shame. The search is narrowed to lovely Bel Air. The so-called Wet Prince of Bel Air, still anonymous, but the Center for Investigative Reporting is taking a research guess. I mean, you're basically looking for who has the greenest yard.
Yeah, the greenest and wettest yard.
Perhaps a retired broadcast CEO with a 6-acre yard. Did he use enough water to flush 14 toilets non-stop day and night for an entire year?
This much water, it's got to be mostly landscaping.
I'm going Bel Air undercover. Pretty sure this is how people dress around here.
I can't see anything.
This is pointless. Our investigative friends used satellites and algorithms used to study soil moisture in crops. So you guys think you've narrowed it down to 7 most likely suspects, right?
That's true.
A retail heiress, a soap opera producer, both gave no comment to those reporters. Will the Wet Prince or Princess, if unmasked, be thrown in jail? No. For now, under California law, overhydration is not a crime, as long as you pay for what you use. And by the way, 11.8 million.
Oh my gosh, that's great.
Yeah. So that's a little funny take on that, but it's a good explanation of what we did. And the one other thing I really like about AU is, for me, being here and with some of my students, at SOC, because this university-wide is so collaborative, we've been able to tap into resources at other schools. So we have an expert who does satellite analysis of environmental data. We have people who, do harder data science, and we are often able to just tap into that expertise, which I also really love.
Were those your colleagues in the news story? Nice.
Yeah, they interviewed him for like 3 hours for like to nod.
To nod.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, yeah, no, thank you for that presentation on I'm really struck with how in demand the skills are. That really did stick with me. Do you want to say more about that, just in terms of the jobs that
Well,
are
I think,
hiring?
I think not only are their jobs doing specifically data journalism, but most newsrooms now, for beat reporters, investigative reporters, editors, they are looking for people who have those skills and data skills on top of it. So it just really isn't enough to be able to, write words or
Interview people.
Yeah. You really need to have additional skills because it's a competitive market. That is the one area, though, where it's really hard to find people. And so there are lots of jobs open.
That's fantastic. All right. So if anyone has any questions for Jennifer, please feel free to write it in the chat box. I have a few questions myself. So before joining AU at the Investigative Reporting Workshop, you were the senior editor for data journalism for Reveal from the Center for Investigative Reporting. What does that job entail? What does the editor for data journalism do?
It was a little bit of a misnomer. I was actually an investigative editor there. That technically was my title, but I had 4 teams. I had our criminal justice team, our immigration team, our data reporters, who were the folks who mostly did data analysis, and then our interactives team. So I had a team of about 14 people who did, investigations that had nothing to do with data and more data-centered investigations. So, but we were a very collaborative newsroom, so we were often working with people on the radio show, people on the video team. So having those multi-skills was really important.
That's fantastic.
2 of my reporters were Pulitzer finalists last year, so that was exciting.
Congratulations. Do you think that the future of news reporting will come from nonprofit organizations like the IRW and CIR, or do you think news will continue to be a combination of the nonprofit and the for-profit news sources?
I don't know. If I had the answer to that, I would probably be a very rich person. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of great work being done in nonprofits. ProPublica also in there because they have the resources to do that. But they're very focused on investigative reporting. So I think for providing general news to a community, that's a bigger challenge. I'm really excited to see what the LA Times is doing. They're hiring tons of people, and that new owner of the LA Times appears to be pretty committed to doing news. So maybe more owners will pop up like him, fewer owners like Alden Capital, which is a hedge fund that bought a bunch of newspapers, and fewer of those. So we'll see. We'll see. I still think there's tons of opportunities out there.
I think that's great. You see the benefit in both, because the daily newspaper, they really are the eyes and ears of the local community, and go to the city council meetings. You still need someone doing that, as are these larger nonprofit organizations. I think are doing more long term. I talk with my hands. You can't see this.
We're both like waving.
This is why I do audio only, because if I turn on the webcam, people are going to be so confused and just distracted by my hands. You know me so well already, Jennifer. But yeah, no, that's very beneficial to see that they're not competing. They're both necessary. And
I also think there's a lot of collaboration now, where we used to constantly compete, and now there's all kinds of collaborations to do better journalism together.
So how did you end up in the classroom? When did you discover your love of teaching? And then why did you decide to come to AU in 2017?
So I've always tried to adjunct on the side,
Really?
just to keep my teaching skills up. I actually taught here 15 years ago, and
Really?
Decided to come back to the Washington area. I also have always taught in newsrooms. I developed the on-the-road training program at investigative reporters and editors. Teaching professionals and teaching students is a little different, but hopefully the results are the same. So.
Okay, so there wasn't just one, as Oprah would say, aha moment with the teaching. It seems like that's always been something you love to do. You got to do it in the newsroom, and then you got to transition to the classroom. That's very interesting.
I didn't get to grade my reporters, though, when I trained them.
Journalists are often portrayed in TV shows and movies. I'm obsessed with the newsroom and the movie Spotlight, which, now that I've talked to you about data journalism, I can now see that in that movie and how they entered in that data into an Excel spreadsheet to find patterns. In your opinion, do you think there's any movie or TV show that gets it right, that really portrays a realistic day in the life of a journalist?
I don't watch the newsroom, actually. I should. Spotlight is very accurate. I mean, I know all those guys, and
Really?
they did amazing work. I love journalism movies and TV shows. So I think it's different in every newsroom. So
Yeah.
it's the trouble is it's like people think it's so exciting when they see those things, and then they want to come visit the newsroom and you give them a tour, and it's like, here's a bunch of desks.
Here's people sitting in front of a computer on a telephone.
Yeah. I mean, the one fun thing at Reveal was that if Al Letson, the host, was recording the show, it was a little fun to watch, Al in the, from the control room. But watching a bunch of desks is never that exciting.
What do you think people who want to be journalists, who are coming to our master's program because they want to be journalists, what do you think they don't get about working in a newsroom? Or what surprised you when you started working in your first newsroom?
That's a good question. I mean, I think probably some of the students are coming from newsrooms and want to extend their career. Yeah. But if you've never been in a newsroom, I think that's one cool thing about being at AU, because there's so many opportunities to actually be in a newsroom as part of the program. There's the Washington Post practicum. There's the investigative reporting workshop. So I think, I think there's lots of opportunities to get a taste of what it's like to be in a real newsroom.
Do you think it's possible to be a journalist and have work-life balance? I am afraid of being a journalist. I think it's the scariest, most stressful, most emergency room doctors and journalists. That's how I see the hardest jobs in the world. But is it possible to have the work-life balance? Be yeah, I'm going to go work on this story and these stories, and I'm going to go home at the end of the day.
What is this work-life balance you speak of? No, I'm just kidding. So for me, I mean, I know people I had a lot of people on my team at Reveal who had families, and I encourage them to actually see their families. When things are breaking, or there's, all of us. So now that I'm here and I'm in a newsroom where we do mostly long-term investigations, when something is breaking, I feel like I have to be somewhere.
So interesting.
Because it's just
in your blood.
Yeah. So you just want to be part of that. So, I think it is. I think if you work efficiently, which we don't always do, sometimes we spend a lot of time online or on Twitter or whatever. If we actually work efficiently, you can get a lot done. I worked with someone who was the courts reporter at the Dallas Morning News. He got more done than anybody else I knew, and he was always leaving to go home with his family every night.
Good for him. Yeah. Okay, so it is possible, but also being a journalist, that you are that kind of person that you will drop everything to go get the story if something is breaking.
Yeah, I mean, to do this job, you really want to have to do it.
Yeah. What advice do you have for students who will be starting the journalism program, any of our grad programs really, this fall or this summer, technically, because our full-time program starts at the boot camp? What helpful piece of advice could you give them before they start?
I would really kind of try to figure out what you want to end up doing later and what classes can give you those skills. And it may be that you're taking classes in some other programs, but to really build up the portfolio and get the superpowers that you want to have going forward. Don't just have somebody tell you what classes to take. You figure out what's the best program for you. I did when I was in grad school at another university. I combined computer science and journalism and was very discouraged from doing that. It's been extremely beneficial for me, so I'm glad I didn't listen to them. So I figure out what program works best for you.
I like that. All right, we have some questions from participants. Emily asked, what coding languages are most useful for data reporting? What do you use most frequently and in what contexts?
So I think it depends on what you're doing. I would say probably in most newsrooms for front-end programming, JavaScript is probably most commonly used. For back-end, Python and Django. I think a lot of data analysis is done with just SQL and databases and spreadsheets. So those are kind of the starter languages. The programming language R is becoming more and more popular in newsrooms, mainly because it's free and can do a lot of things. So I would think just understanding one language would help you, kind of build your portfolio to gain more.
Do people get some of that computer language in your classroom?
So they will next year.
Okay, great.
Right now we've only had one data class. Hopefully next year we will be adding an advanced data class. But that said, I've had students take classes in data science, classes in environmental science, so there's other opportunities. Because I'm also an editor at the workshop, I only teach one class a semester. So but there's lots of opportunities to do
so
that.
People can get their feet wet, like people who are coming from no computer science background, but just the love for journalism and wanting to get these skills can get that from your data-driven journalism class, like the intro, and then if you want to get more into the computer coding, you can take it upon yourself to learn that more. All right, so Kristen asked, how much has data journalism changed over the years, and how have you kept up with the latest data journalism developments?
It's not changed as quickly as I thought it would when I started out. When I started out, I thought everybody in every newsroom would be able to analyze data, and that's just not the case. It's still something that a pretty small number of people do, so there's lots of opportunities for that. I do think one of the advances that's helped most newsrooms is the advent of open source programming languages, because when I started out, you had to pay for, thousands of dollars for mapping software or thousands of dollars for statistics software, and you just don't have to do that anymore. So I think it's that the availability of those tools is making it a lot more available to reporters in newsrooms.
Kristen also asked, as an investigative reporter, is there more work-life balance than daily beat reporter, or at least is there a better understanding when your long hours are going to be? So, okay, her question is about being an investigative reporter versus being a daily beat reporter.
I really think it depends on where you are, who your editor is. I've worked for people who they are there until midnight. I've worked for people who go home right at 5 to be with their families. So I really think it's kind of the environment that you go into.
Great questions. All right, well, another question is coming in. You guys are amazing. Emily asked, what platforms and websites do you use to create interactive graphics without having to build your own from scratch or use programming?
So my team always built our stuff from scratch.
Wow.
But I do know that, things like Tableau are very commonly used, Chart Builder, Data Wrapper. So there are some of those tools where you don't have to build your own from the ground up. We just had very specialized needs, and I had a team that could do it, so we tended to build our own. But for some of the reporters in other parts of the newsroom, they were able to use some of those tools to build interactives for their stories.
Great questions, Emily and Kristen. Thank you both for your questions. And feel free to email me, leela@american.edu. If you have any follow-up questions, questions about the program. Jennifer, would you be willing to provide your email address?
Oh, lovely.
I know you did on your slide.
Or
great, yeah.
Your O is faded off your computer.
I know. I'm so lazy. Awesome. Yep. So LaFleur@american.edu. I think we've got some future data journalists on this participate. No, I'm just pointing at the screen. Not because a new question came up, but I just think just by the quality of these questions, I think we have some data journalists coming through the pipeline who will hopefully be joining us this year. And I want to thank you for your time. As I mentioned to you before we started, every student of yours that I've met in the past few weeks as I've been talking about this webinar is just obsessed with you. You are one of their favorite professors in the program. So your
I give them
students are glad you're
snacks.
here.
That's why.
That's the secret. They're glad you're here, and I'm so glad I got to chat with you more. And I want to thank our participants for participating today. So I hope you all have a happy Friday and a great weekend.
Thank you. Bye.